Good morning, second period. How you doing?
Good.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
We're good.
Awesome. So we're going to be taking one. We're going to be taking 1 page of notes today.
Mine, what?
As you can see, I'll wait.
They're hers.
Thank you. We have a writing utensil, pen or pencil, doesn't matter. You may want 2 different colored of things, either pens or highlighters. Okay, so any of these 2, if you don't, it's okay. You can do it with a single color, but I recommend 2 different colors if you have it. Today's title from the Do Now board is going to be Conditional Statements. All right. Remember, if you haven't gotten a chance to watch the video 2.1, you might be a little lost today. I need to borrow my notes. All right. So conditional statement is that if-then statement. It's got a condition. If the first part of it is true, then the second part of it is true. Okay? That's what this conditional statement says. So I'm going back to my notes and I'm going to find some vocabulary words, and we're going to rewrite our vocabulary words in this kind of if-then format. Let's start with collinear. What's the definition for collinear? Sides of a line. Definitely has something to do with line, yeah.
A point that line.
He totally took the words out of your mouth, didn't he? Yeah. Quit reading his mind.
A point. Oh, you already said it.
You already said, yeah, points on the same line. Okay. So collinear means points on the same line. How would we write it as an if-then? How would we write this points on the same line as an if-then? How can we rewrite this definition, points on the same line, as an if-then statement? If some condition, okay, if points, yep. It's just that simple. If points are on the same line, then they are collinear. Gorgeous. Now, if you're using different colors, now's the time to pull out the different colors. If you're not, then highlight this first part right after the if once. That's the hypothesis. Okay, that's what you're testing. That's what you're checking to see is true. Then the second part, underline it twice if you're only using one color. Since I'm using multiple colors, I'm only going to do it once. But if you're using the same color, like just a pencil, underline it twice. That's the conclusion. That's what you get if that first part is true. Let's try a different definition. How about midpoint?
Midpoint?
Midpoint. What was the definition of a midpoint?
The midpoint isn't it the middle, like the middle of the middle of the segment?
The middle of the segment. Yeah. It's the point in the middle. So how would you write that as an if-then statement?
If the point, if
What he said.
what he said.
If the point's in the middle of a segment, then it's a midpoint. Let's be a little more specific. If it's in the middle, what does it do to the segment?
It separates it, it divides it
Divides it in
to
half into 2 segments, and their measures are equal. So then, let's use another word for equal. If they have an equal measure, then they are congruent. So if a point divides a segment into 2 congruent parts, then Look at already writing it. I love it. If a point, I gotta catch up to you, dude. You went too fast. Divides a segment into two congruent parts, then it is the midpoint. The midpoint. There is only one midpoint. Take a moment, identify your hypothesis, underline it once, or in the same color as the first time. Don't underline the if. The if is not part of the hypothesis. The if tells you where the
A
hypothesis
point
is.
divides a segment
There
into
you go.
two congruent parts.
You're right, that's it. Underline it once.
Okay, whatever.
Then underline the conclusion twice. Don't underline the then. That just tells you where the conclusion is. It's not part of the conclusion.
I'm doing my notes. Oh my god. I've never done it before.
I know, this is great. All right, so far so good. Seems pretty easy, right?
The hypothesis is a point, yes. A point
A point divides, yeah. Yeah, all the way to the comma, yes? And the conclusion is the stuff after the then. All right.
Oh, wait, you're not supposed to. Oh, you're not supposed to underline the word then.
Don't underline the word then. Uh-oh, maybe make a note to yourself. Don't underline the then or the if.
All
right. So now we have some relatives. We know what a conditional statement is. We know how to write these if-thens. Now let's go and find their theos and their primos, right? That one came out really English, really white sounding. Let's go and find their relatives. Okay? The first relative that I want to talk about is the converse. The converse. And the converse is when you swap, when you exchange the hypothesis and the conclusion. You found him? Where are they? Oh, right there? You're on his feet? Yeah. He's wearing Converse. It's where you exchange, you swap, you trade places.
About like Converse, like shoes.
Yep. You trade place with the hypothesis and the conclusion. So let's look at the converse of collinear. The converse of collinear. You see the conclusion on the original statement? Write that one first. If, okay, it says if they are collinear. If what are collinear? If points. So if points are collinear, then what's your new conclusion?
I can't see.
Then it
I still can't see. I'm blind. No, I'm gonna put on my
We're
glasses.
looking at collinear. Then they are on the same line. There we go. So if points are collinear, then they are on the same line.
Wes, we're not supposed to advertise on YouTube, right? Oh, why did it be a
All right. What would be the converse for midpoint?
Con what?
What would be the converse statement for midpoint?
The converse for statement?
For midpoint.
For midpoint?
For midpoint, what was the original conclusion?
If the midpoint divides...
If it is the midpoint, if what is the midpoint?
The segment.
If the no, if the line, no, if the point is the midpoint.
If a point,
Sorry.
it's all right. It's a little tricky sometimes switching back and forth. If a point, oops, I was about to rewrite it from the beginning.
Why do my glasses do that?
If a point is the midpoint, keep the off-topic chatter down, please, or I can't use this video. Thank you. If a point is the midpoint, then what does it do?
Right, so it divides.
Yeah, you divide.
Yeah, you divide.
There you go, write it down. Then it divides a segment into two congruent parts. We are almost done. Awesome, that is converse. All right, here's the next one. The next relative is going to be the inverse. The inverse asks you to negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. What does the word negate mean?
Denied.
Denied, yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. To deny it. To make it mean the opposite. So if my original statement was, I like unicorns, then to negate it, I would say,
Unicorns are real.
I do not like unicorns.
Oh,
Okay? So all we did was put in that word not. So what would be the inverse of collinear? We go to our original statement, okay? We don't go to the converse. You go back all the way up to the very top of the page to that original. If the original hypothesis were points are on the same line, right? So then what would be the negation of points are on the same line? Make it mean the opposite.
points are not in the same as
Beautiful. Points are not. So if points are not on the same line, then the original conclusion was they are collinear. Negate it.
And they are not.
Then they are not. You guys are experts at this. Y'all haven't done this before, have you?
Maybe.
Maybe. No? You
When I
have?
was in college.
You have? And you when you were in college?
Yeah, when I was in jail.
Awesome. Officer, I did not shoot that man. That was your inverse of that statement.
I was
All right.
debating my.
Give me the inverse of midpoint. Inverse of midpoint. Remember, go back to the very top. Go back to your original midpoint.
Okay, so I was in jail.
All right, tell me what to write. What's my new negated hypothesis?
Die.
The original hypothesis was if a point divides a segment into two congruent parts.
You're not.
We're negating that portion. A point divides a segment into two congruent parts.
The point does not.
A point does not divide. Good job. If a point,
I said
write it down. Yeah, I love that you're applauding for me. Go ahead. If a point does not divide a segment, write it all down, please. There's a lot of writing on this part. I'm sorry. Do it. Into two congruent parts. Then what? The original conclusion was it is the midpoint. Negate it.
However, you say the
It
original,
is the midpoint.
It's not the midpoint.
You have given every single one of these. You are fantastic.
Shut up.
Then it is not the midpoint. Lovely work. All right. We have one last relation. And we're done. And look, thank goodness, because we're at the end of the page.
Yeah.
Whoop, whoop.
Give me 5 minutes.
You're already at, so- okay, some of you are already at the end of the page. That's okay. Flip your page over, go to the back. I need to rewrite this because it looks,
Like poo.
it looked ugly.
Like poo.
I didn't like my handwriting. All right, this word. The longest of them all
I don't like my handwriting.
is contrapositive. It's the longest because there's more to do. I swear to you, it's not very, very much. Okay? You're going to swap and negate. the hypothesis and the conclusion. And again, you're going back to the original. All right, so let's write the contrapositive of collinear. So contrapositive collinear, swap, then negate. Or negate, then swap. Let's look up here. We have the negation over here, don't we? We have the inverse already.
Yeah, there was
So then take this one and now swap it. So what would be the conclusion of this inverse statement right here?
non-collinear points are non-collinear.
If points are not collinear, then
They are
They're not in the
then they're not on the same line. Fantastic. Write it with me. If points are
Oh, this is
not collinear, then they do not lie on the same line. Can you see how midpoint would be turned into the contrapositive?
yes.
Okay, I'm not going to write it. If you've got room, I'd like you to write it. I'm not going to because I'm out of space. But read it. What would it read as? If,
We write that.
yeah, go ahead and write it down. But I'd like you guys to say it. So the
Is it
contrapositive midpoint would say, huh?
Is of mid.
Yeah, this is of midpoint. So the contrapositive midpoint says what?
Does that say line?
Yeah.
It's saying line.
Yes.
If the point,
What's the difference between lie and line?
then it is not the midpoint.
Okay, so if it is not, if what is not the midpoint? A point.
If a point is not
It's
the
the point.
midpoint,
So if a point is not the midpoint, then what?
a point does not divide the segment into two.
Then it does not divide. Gorgeous. You guys are experts in this. Beautiful work. Here is the task that comes with these notes. Okay? Jot down the directions so that you have them for yourself. There they are. Go to your notes. Select any 10 vocabulary words in your notes and write the definition as the conditional if-then statement. Just like what we did with collinear and midpoint. Yes, please do. Please do. That would make me so happy. After you write the definition as an if-then statement, you need to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of each definition. Okay? So you're going to end up, wait. You're going to end up, you're ending up with 40, count them, 40 different sentences. One is your original if-then definition. Then you have your converse, then you have your inverse, and then you have your contrapositive. 4 for each, 10 definitions total. That's 40 different sentences. What's the due date?
Mañana, today,
What's the due date?
the 30th,
The
Oh,
30th,
your time.
which is what day?
Friday.
Friday.
Next
The end of the
Tuesday.
The end of the
You have a 3-day weekend to work on it. You're welcome. Good morning, third period. How are you? Awesome. All right. So as you know, we are recording today's lecture so that you have a copy of it on YouTube. All right. There's going to be a lot of writing today, but no drawing. As you can see, I've got a pen out, and I've also got 2 different colored pens. If you've got some different colored writing utensils, now's the time to pull out 2 of your favorite colors. If you don't have different colored writing utensils, that's okay. We can do it without the different colors. All right, so you guys, title, conditional statements and their relatives. So you guys already had a chance, hopefully, to watch the video on the Flipped Math website, where we started talking about inductive reasoning, we started talking about proof writing, we started talking about conditional statements. And to remind you guys as you're setting up your papers, conditional statements are those if-then statements. Okay? It's a condition. If something is true, then this other thing is true. All right? And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to take some vocabulary words that we've got from your past notes. If you've got your notebooks, and I heard a lot of paper rustling and binders opening and closing, so I know you guys have your binders on your desk. Go into your binder, and we're going to pull some vocabulary words. I'm going to lead you through some examples so that you can use it. Okay, so let's write the conditional statement for, let's start off with an easy one. Let's start off with collinear. What's the definition for collinear?
Same line.
Close, stuff that lies in the same line. And when we talk about stuff, it's points. Fantastic. So the definition says points that lie on the same line. But how would you write that definition as an if something, then something else? How would you write points on the same line?
If points are on the same line, it's collinear.
Beautiful. If points are on the same line,
Then they are collinear.
then they are collinear. So we'll write that as our original conditional. If points are on the same line, then they are collinear. Beautiful. Now here's where the different colored pens come into play. This part right here after the if is the hypothesis. Oh, I'm totally misspelling that word. Sorry, this is supposed to be a Y. Right there. Hypothesis. And the stuff after the then is the conclusion. I'll zoom it in a little bit. There we go. Hope that's a little bit better for the reading.
Can we turn the light off?
Light off? Sure. Volunteer to turn out the lights. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Okay, so the screen's going to go dark momentarily. Yes, please. Man, give it just a second while it realizes.
Nighttime.
Hello. There we go. It had to think about it. There we go. Is that a little better to see?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So there was collinear. Let's do, for the fun times, let's do one of our theorems, the vertical angle theorem. Can you find that in your notes from 9:18? I think that was Monday. And find the vertical angle theorem and read me the 4-word sentence that is the vertical angle theorem from 9:18. Oh, that was last week, Thursday. From 9:18, yeah.
It says, I do not have it.
Oh no.
Are we sure? Did we write that?
Yeah, we wrote it. It was under relationship.
There are two non-adjacent angles formed by intersecting lines.
Beautiful. That's the definition of vertical angles. Read for me the vertical angle theorem, which was right below that.
Angles are congruent.
Vertical angles are congruent. Beautiful. How do we write that as an if-then statement?
If vertical.
If vertical angles are what?
I was like, that's what I was
Doesn't make any
like.
sense.
You're right, so we've got to add some more words.
If angles are congruent, then they're vertical.
Close. If angles are what kind of angles?
Vertical.
Then they are?
Congruent. If angles are vertical, then they're congruent.
If angles are vertical. But see, that sounds weird. Okay? So we're going to classify it. Let's put if, how many angles do we need?
Two.
2. So if 2 angles are vertical angles, then they are congruent. So the vertical angle theorem, as an if-then statement, would read, if 2 angles are vertical angles, then they are congruent. Lovely. Take a moment and underline the hypothesis. If you're using single color, underline it once. If you're using single color, underline the conclusion twice. Take a moment, identify those.
Oh, I got it.
Thumbs up when you got them underlined.
Oh, we're supposed to underline it?
Yes, please underline. Thank you. Thank
Why
you.
did I get it wrong? Why did I get it wrong?
Thank you. Underline for the hypothesis. Thank you. It's the stuff after the if, right? But before the comma. Okay. Got it? Awesome. All right. So you guys are masters at this.
Yes.
Yes. All right. I'm going to scoot stuff down just a little bit. All right. So let's go into the relatives. And the first relative that I want to practice is the converse. What was the converse according to that video? Do you remember?
Converse takes the condition and switch the hypothesis and conclusion.
So it takes the original conditional and it switches the hypothesis and the conclusion. So we're going to write it down again just so that we remember, and we're going to shorten that to say swap hypothesis and conclusion. All right, so let's take the collinear conditional and let's write it as the converse. So the original conditional for collinear was if points are the same, then they are collinear. So what would be the converse of that? If what are collinear? You said if they are collinear. Okay. If what are collinear?
The lines? The angles?
Look at the original hypothesis.
The points are
Points.
collinear.
So if points are collinear, then
They are collinear.
they're on the same line. So we're taking this original collinear up here, and we're flipping the hypothesis and the conclusion. So if points are collinear, then they are on the same line. Fantastic. Gorgeous. What's the converse of the vertical angle theorem? Look back at the original conditional.
Okay. If vertical angles are congruent, then there are two angles.
Close.
If angles are congruent, then they are vertical.
How many angles?
Two.
Two.
Angles are congruent, then they are vertical.
There we go. If two angles are congruent, then they are vertical angles. Beautiful converse. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if these statements, when we're done writing them, if they make any sense or not. Okay? We're not discussing whether these statements are true at the end or not, okay? We're just practicing how to write them.
Here's mine.
Right. Fantastic. Let's go on to the next relative, inverse. Don't ask me why that started off as a little h. The world may never know. All right, inverse. From the video, what was inverse? Opposite. Yeah. What was it?
Huh?
What was it?
She said if I hear I'll tell you.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's cool. Okay. I heard voice. I was just checking.
Oh.
It's okay. You can say always. It was nothing. It was nothing. Okay, cool. So he said the opposite. He's exactly right. You're gonna negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. What does the word negate mean?
To erase.
To erase, to undo, to stop, to make it the opposite of. So if I said, I like unicorns, negate the statement would make it mean the opposite. I do not like unicorns. I don't know if I hate them or I dislike them or whatever. I just know that I don't like them. Okay?
They're so cute.
So let's find, notice that we're negating both the hypothesis and the conclusion. So what would be the inverse of collinear?
But now we're doing it back to where it's hypothesis and then.
Correct. You're taking your original conditional.
Inverse of collinear is,
If points are
not on the same.
If points are not on the same
then
line,
they are non-collinear.
then they are, but don't use the word non, because yes, I know that means not, but that's a definition, that's a vocabulary word. So you want to make sure that it's clear you're negating by using that word not. And I'm glad that you did that. Thank you.
Mhm.
If points do not lie on the same line, and I think I just went off the page, I'm sorry. Then they are not collinear. Thank you. All right, inverse of that, of the vertical angle theorem. Remember, you're going to use the original conditional statement from the very top of the page.
If two angles aren't vertical,
If two angles are not vertical,
vertical.
Then they are not congruent.
then they are not congruent. Beautiful. If two angles are not vertical angles, then they are not congruent. Beautiful. Lovely. It's very, today's International Talk Like a Pirate Day, I think.
Talk like a pirate?
Yeah, I heard it
It's
on
a
the
real
news this
thing.
morning. It totally is. Arr, mateys. That definition be lovely. I'm sorry, not definition. That inverse. That inverse be lovely.
On the scallywag.
All right. Here's the last relationship. It's the contrapositive.
I ran out of room.
You ran out of room. Go ahead and go to the back of the page. Put your bar. Don't forget your margin.
Okay.
Yeah, your fat margin. Oh, no. My goodness. All right. So, contrapositive from the video, what did it say?
Switch inverse.
Switch and inverse. Oh, switch the inverse is what it said. Okay, switch the inverse. Okay, so it's basically swap and negate. So you're going to take you're either going to take the inverse and swap them, or you're going to take the converse and negate them. Either way gets you to the same place.
Wait, say that again?
To get the contrapositive, you either take the inverse and swap the hypothesis and
And then it
conclusion,
goes right back to the original statement.
or you go to the converse and negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. Either way you do it, both ways are right. You're going to get to the same place, okay?
So inverse, you swap.
Or the converse and negate. So I'm going to shortcut it and say swap and negate. Again, referencing back.
Because I put swap and negate, and then underneath I put inverse. I can swap it and converse. I don't know.
It might. Let me take when this is done, bring your notes up and let's discuss one-on-one.
We got 7
Okay.
minutos.
Oh, 7 minutos. Okay, let's do this super fast. All right, so contrapositive of collinear. Contrapositive of collinear. All right, look at collinear. Either the original statement, swap and negate, the converse and negate, or the inverse and swap. Your pick.
We need it.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. All right. I'm going to use the inverse because I have it sitting here already. So I'm going to take the inverse and I'm going to swap the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the hypothesis here on this inverse says if they're not collinear. If points are not collinear, then they do not lie on the same line. See how we did that? We took the inverse statement and we swapped the hypothesis and the conclusion.
Points are not collinear, they do nothing.
All right, let's find the contrapositive of the vertical angle theorem. Since we have the inverse written, it's visible on the screen, let's go ahead and use that one. If, what?
Two angles?
If they are not congruent.
If two angles are not congruent, then they are not vertical. Beautiful. That's it. You guys are masters at this.
Yes, right?
Perfection. Yes. Real quick. That's it. Let me zoom it out just a bit. Here is the task for this particular set of notes. Yes, you may take. Good morning, fourth period. How you doing?
Good.
Awesome.
Learn.
Ready to learn? I love hearing it. How did you know I had the recording on? You didn't know, so that was spontaneous. I love it. Spontaneous, fantastic. We're going to take one page of notes today. Hopefully you watched the video 2.1. If you did, this will make complete sense. If you didn't, you might be a little lost. That's okay. You can watch that video another time, and this video will get posted on YouTube so that you can watch it there and remind yourself of what we did. All right, so please make sure that you have set up your paper. It looks like this. And the only things that you're going to need today are stuff to write with. So we're not going to be doing any drawing, just a lot of writing today. Here we go. So a conditional statement is an if-then statement. It says, if something is true, then this other thing is going to be true. Okay, that's what this conditional statement is. It gives a condition for things. So let's practice writing some conditional statements. Let's take the definition for collinear. What's the definition of collinear? Excuse me. What's the definition of collinear? Straight. Points on the same line? Yeah, there it is. Point. You were trying to get there. You're like, no, because you're doing the motion. Yeah. Points on the same line. Fantastic. How do you write that in this if-then kind of way? If something, then something else. You have to find a way to get the sentence points on the same line to be written as an if-then sentence.
If points on the same line, then they are collinear.
Beautiful. If points are on the same line, then they are collinear. Beautiful conditional statements. If-then statements are called conditional, so that's what we'll start off with writing. If points are on the same line, then they are collinear. If you're using different colored pens or highlighters, now's the time to break them out. If you're not, that's okay. I'd like you to underline this first portion of the sentence. Do not underline the if, okay? It's everything after the if. That's the hypothesis. Okay? Everything after the then, the second part of the sentence after then, underline it twice, please. If you're using different colored pens, you can just highlight it with, underline it with the color. If you're using highlighters fine. But underline the conclusion. So this part after then is the conclusion. Beautiful. Now I'm going to go into our past notes, and I'm going to look for a word that we defined in our notes. Here we go. Here's a good one. Let's do obtuse. What's the definition for obtuse? This was on our notes from 918. With 180, it equals more than 90.
Then more than 90.
An angle more than 90 degrees, but less than
For
180.
this child, do you have work for her?
Same directions as the young gentleman you asked me about this morning.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so let's write that as an if then. So if,
An angle is more than 90 degrees.
but
Less than 180.
less than 180, then, beautiful, let's write that. If an angle measures more than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees, then it is, well, let's put the right particle in there, right? Then it is an obtuse angle. You don't need to have it, I'm just being picky. There you go. All right, take a moment, underline the hypothesis with one underline. If you're using highlighters, highlight it in one color. Underline the conclusion twice, or if you're using highlighters, highlight it with a different color. Do that now. I'm going to zoom in a bit tighter so it's easier to read. There we go. And focus. Lovely. Okay, you guys are really good at this. Awesome. Let's look at our first relative of these conditional statements, and that's the converse. Those of you who watched the video, do you remember what converse asked you to do? Or you can be honest and say, we didn't watch the video. You didn't watch the video. Okay. The converse very quickly said, swap the hypothesis and the conclusion. Right? So this is why we identified the hypothesis and the conclusion of the other statements. So let's write the converse of collinear. What was the conclusion of the conditional statement for collinear? The conclusion double underlined? They are collinear. What are collinear? Points. So then the converse statement will be, if points are collinear, then what?
They are on this one.
They are on the same line. Beautiful, on the same line. Lovely. So once you've identified it, writing the converse becomes really easy. Okay? You may have to change the sentence around a little bit. That's okay. Let's write the converse of obtuse. If, what was the conclusion of your original obtuse sentence? That, beautiful. That's the original hypothesis. We want the original conclusion so that we can write it as our new hypothesis. What was the original conclusion? If an angle is obtuse. See how we're starting kind of at the back of the sentence? Yeah. Awesome. If an angle is an obtuse angle, then, now say the part you were saying.
It measures
Mm-hmm.
more than 90,
It measures more than 90 degrees.
but less than 180.
Beautiful. It measures more than 90 degrees, but less than 180 degrees. Perfect. Your converse statements are fantastic. You guys are really good at this. Nicely done. Okay. Moving on to the next relative. This relative is the inverse. All right. So the inverse said negate the hypothesis and conclusion. Do y'all know what the word negate means? Is that a new word for some of you? Negate? Yeah. All right, so if it's a new word for you, highlight it or underline it, put a question mark by it, because that's new. And then I'm going to come over here to my very left-hand margin. I've got plenty of space over here. I'm going to put the question mark, and I'm going to write negate. All right, so the word negate means, you know what? I'm going to go to dictionary.com because I want to make sure that I get the right definition. Okay, so going to my computer or to my cell phone, and I'm going to go to dictionary.com, and I'm going to type in the word negate. You guys are welcome to pull out your phones and do that. It says, as a verb, to be negative, to deny the existence or truth of, to make it mean the opposite. So if I said, I like unicorns, okay, but not necessarily hate. Yes, I know that's the opposite of like. It kind of gives that same feeling. But to be strict about it, I do not like unicorns. Now, I don't know if I hate them or if it's just I'm indifferent, or I don't know where hate gives this kind of degree of how much I don't like them, right? We're being really strict. We don't know the degree. We just know like and don't like, the complete opposite. So it's putting in that not word in there. All right, fantastic. So we'll have it say to make it mean the opposite. Use not. And I'm gonna make that really small, and I'm gonna put in here where I got that definition from. Okay? So that way when I'm going back through my notes and I'm looking at it, I don't have to wonder, where did I come up with that definition? Right? I'm telling myself, oh, I went to dictionary.com. Okay? All right. So negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. Now go back to your very original conditional statement for collinear. What was the original hypothesis for collinear? Points are on the same line. So how do you make that the opposite? How do you negate that? Points are not on the same line. Yeah. You got it. Points are not on the same line. Fabulous work. What was the original conclusion for that conditional statement? They are collinear. So say it one more time. They are not collinear would be the negation. Beautiful. You got this. All right, let's do obtuse. What was the original hypothesis for that conditional? If it's more than 90 degrees but less than 180, okay?
Less
So
than,
if it's more than 90 and more.
no, less than 90
Yeah, but more than
and but more than 180.
Okay. And that more than 180 is kind of making your brains hurt a little bit, right? Because so far we haven't talked about angles that have degrees more than 180. So when we're looking at obtuse angles, we're going to, yeah, I guess we'd have to put in there because that's part of it, to be strict about it. No, you're right. I love it. Okay, so if an angle measures, what did you say, less than 90? Less than 90 degrees. And the original statement had the word but, so let's put the word or, because now it could be one or the other. Whereas the other one is really specific. It had to be more than 90, but less than 180. Now it can be less than 90 or it can be more than 180. Okay, So, or, and I'm going to continue, more than 180 degrees. Then, what? Then it is not an obtuse angle. Perfect. And I heard a few of you saying it, muttering it really soft. Good job. Nicely done. Almost. We have one last relative. Here we go. And this relative has the longest name because there's more to do on this one than the others. This relative's name is contrapositive. Contrapositive. All right. Contrapositive, you can get to it in 3 different ways, and it doesn't matter which of these ways you pick, it's going to get you to the same place. You can either start from your original conditional, swap the hypothesis and the conclusion. Or you can start with the converse and negate. Or you can start with the inverse and swap. They'll get you to the same place. Okay? And it doesn't matter which one of those 3 you pick. So let's write the contrapositive of collinear. And I'm going to start with the converse. Okay? So starting with the converse, I negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. So the hypothesis here of this converse says if points are collinear. So how do I negate that? If points are collinear, the opposite, the negation is not. So put all together, points are not collinear. All right, so there would be our first hypothesis for this contrapositive. If points are not collinear, then the converse conclusion says they are not on the same line. So negate that. Then they
Are.
Well, this one says that they are on the same line. So negate it becomes, yeah, they are not on the same line. On the same line. Fantastic. Let's practice one more time. Let's do obtuse. Gonna scoot, I'm out of room, so I'm gonna twist my thing here. All right, obtuse. So I'm gonna use the inverse of obtuse because that's what's showing. So here's my inverse of obtuse. Inverse says, take the inverse and swap them. So what was my hypothesis for this inverse? If an angle measures less than 90 or more than 180, so we need to negate that statement and say, if an, oh, swap, excuse me. I'm sorry. Got ahead of myself. The inverse and swap, so then this is the conclusion. So if an angle is not an obtuse angle, right? Okay. If an angle is not an obtuse angle, then it measures less than 90 or, right? You're grabbing the conclusion, the hypothesis from this one. Then it measures less than 90 degrees or more than 180 degrees. You see it? Where all that came from? Okay? That's it. That's the whole point for today. You have a task list for this. I'm going to move this for a moment. Here it is. Woo. All right, so here is the assignment for it. From your notes, you're going to go through all the notes you've taken for the entire year, and you're going to look for any 10 vocabulary words that have been given. I'm going to stress that I'd like you to pick the ones that you have trouble with, and I'd like you to write their definitions as those conditional if-then, just like what we did at the top of this page. So you'll have 10 if-then. And then for each definition, I want you to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive. So when you're done with this assignment, you will have 40 different sentences that you have written. Right? When is it due? Look at the due date. The 30th, which is next Tuesday.
And 40 sentences?
40 sentences. They're going to look something like this. Yep, see my example? So you have the original, then you have the converse, and the inverse, and the contrapositive. Okay? So that would be 1. You're going to have 10 of those because you're picking 10 words. Okay? All right. Thank you. Fourth period. Afternoon, fifth period. How you doing? Woo! All right, we're going to take some notes, 1 page worth. Remember, if you didn't watch that video that was assigned, that 2.1 from Flipped Math website, today's lecture might not make any sense. I will do my best, but if you haven't watched that video, you're going to be lost. So please, I encourage you, go back, make sure you watch that video, make sure you take notes on it for your binder check next Friday, not this one, but next. All right, so 1 page worth of notes. As you notice, I had writing utensils. All you really need today, we're just going to do a lot of writing. Oh, I know. All right, so while you set up your paper, want to take a brief moment to just remind you guys what conditional statements are. These are if-then statements. If you meet some criteria, some condition, then something else will happen, right? Make sense? Okay, so let's start with some definitions that we already know, and let's turn them into conditional if-then statements. Collinear. What does collinear mean? What were you going to say? Huh? Yeah, on the same line. What are on the same line? Points. So points on the same line. That's the definition of collinear. Perfect. But how do we write it as an if-then sentence?
If all the points are on the line, then they're collinear.
Yeah, you guys are like twins. If points are on the same line, then they are collinear. So that's what we're going to write. That's our first conditional statement. If points, and notice we're not saying how many, we're just saying if points, are on the same line, then they are collinear. Okay, so there's our original conditional statement. If you're using different colored pens or highlighters, now is the time to break it out. If you're not, it's okay. I'd like you to please underline this part of the sentence. Not the if, but the stuff that comes after the if, up into that comma right before then. If you're using different color, if you're using highlighter, you can highlight it or underline it. Okay. This is the hypothesis of the statement. Okay. Now if you're using different colored writing utensils, take the other color that you have. If you're not using different colors, please underline it twice. That is the conclusion. Oh, did I spell that right? Yeah, conclusion. Okay? And those things will become important in just a moment. All right. Let's try another word. acute. Acute angle. What's the definition for acute angle? Less than 90 degrees. Awesome. Now how would you write that as an if-then sentence? Fantastic. If what of the angle? The degrees, and we call that the measure. So if the measure of an angle is less than 90 degrees, then it's an acute angle. Fantastic. So that's what we'll write. If the measure of an acute angle is less than 90 degrees, and I think I'm writing off the page. No? Okay. Then it is an acute angle. When you're done writing, take a few seconds right now. Underline the hypothesis, double underline the conclusion. Do not underline the word if. Do not double underline the word then. Those are place markers. Okay? Landmarks. So underline the hypothesis, double underline the conclusion. If you're using different colors, just change the colors. That's okay. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready.
Do we have to label it with a hypothesis?
You've already labeled it once. Just mirror. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thumbs up when you've written this down and you've underlined the hypothesis. Thank you. And you've double underlined the conclusion. Thank you. 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 And thank you.
I did it.
Oh, you did it. I'm all dumb. Okay, let's go into their relatives now. The first, so I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I need more coffee. This is me without coffee, by the way. So the first relative to talk about is the converse. Okay, who got to watch the video? This is your quick check if you watch the video. What did converse mean? No, they're not the tennis shoes. Oh, silence. We didn't know. Combine. Yeah, it's sort of like a combine. You're going to take the hypothesis. Going to take the hypothesis and you're going to take the conclusion and you're going to switch places. So in 4 words, we're going to write swap, hypothesis, and conclusion. That's supposed to be a C. So swap the hypothesis and the conclusion, make them change places. Let's write the converse of collinear. All right, so the converse of collinear starts with the conclusion of the original collinear. So what was the conclusion of our original conditional statement for collinear?
They're collinear.
They are collinear. Okay, what are collinear?
Points on the same.
Points. So if points are collinear, then what was the original hypothesis?
Points are on the same.
Points are on the same line, and so our new conclusion is then they are on the same line. That's it. Super hard, right? Super hard? No, not really that hard. Okay, let's do the converse of acute angle. So the converse of our original conditional for acute angle is going to start if what? What was the original conclusion?
It is an acute angle.
If it is an acute angle, if what is an acute angle?
The measure.
Okay, but see, that doesn't make sense, right? And that was what we did the first time. So what are we talking about in terms of it is acute angle? The angle, right? So if an angle is an acute angle. So this is one that we have to change more than just a little bit to make it make sense. If an angle is an acute angle, then, whoops, you know, I just realized that word there shouldn't be there. That one. Yeah, that up here in the original conditional. If the measure of acute angle is, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Sorry. My bad. So if an angle is an acute angle, then its measures less than 90. Lovely. Okay, now notice on the word it's. Okay, I didn't put that little apostrophe. When I don't use that apostrophe, it means that belongs to something, okay? Fantastic. Does this make sense? Okay, how we flipped it and how we needed to rewrite things. Okay, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more because I know I'm writing kind of tiny. There we go, a little bit better. All right. Okay, let's go on to the next relative because y'all seem really good at that. The next relative is the inverse. Inverse means the opposite, yeah. So I'm going to write here my quick word, negates.
You see what games teacher is?
Yes. Like, did y'all see Scott Pilgrim versus the World? Did you see that movie? So, okay, some of you did, some of you didn't. You remember Scott? He was like the opposite of Scott? Yeah? Okay.
When you play Halo, you put them on reverse and people control. You're like, what? Why you can't go up down?
I'm so confused. Okay, so negate the hypothesis and the conclusion, make it the opposite. So if I said, I like unicorns, how would you negate it? I don't like unicorns. Okay? It's that easy. Literally just put a not in there. All right, so let's write the inverse of collinear. So we're going to use the same hypothesis and conclusion from the original statement, which is up there in the notes. It's off screen, but it's up there somewhere. Okay, so the top of your paper, what was the original hypothesis of that conditional for collinear? Points are on the same line. Negate that, you get?
Points aren't on the same.
Points are not on the same line. Lovely. So if points are not on the same line, then what was the original conclusion? They are collinear, and so the negation is?
They are not.
They are not. Beautiful. Notice that we wrote they are not collinear instead of going to our vocab word and saying they are non-collinear. I totally get that they mean the same thing, but we're driving home the point of inverse, which is using the word not in there. Okay? Okay. Write for me the inverse then of acute angle. What was the original hypothesis?
The measure of an angle is less than 90.
The measure of an angle is less than 90, so negate that. More, yeah, I heard a more somewhere over here and you mimicked it, yes. So if the measure of an angle is more than 90 degrees, then, what was the original conclusion? We're looking at acute angle.
It is
Thank you.
an acute angle.
It is an acute angle, so then negate that, you get?
It is not.
It is not. It is not an acute angle. You guys are so good at this. You're stellar. You're awesome. All right. We have one last relative to go over. And this one has the longest name, but because you're doing more stuff. Okay? This relative's name is contrapositive. Ooh, I went off the screen, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. My pen doesn't want to work. Contrapositive. Okay? Contrapositive is basically doing the converse and the inverse at the same time. So you swap and negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. So you can get to the contrapositive in one of three ways. You can go to the original, swap and negate. No big deal. You could go to the converse, which is already swapped for you, and then just negate. Or you could go to the inverse, which is already negated for you, and then just swap them. So what we're going to do on this example. So the contrapositive collinear would be, well, I already have the inverse. It's written up here for me. So let's just swap the inverse. What's the conclusion on the inverse of collinear? That they are not collinear. Yeah, right here. There was the conclusion. The conclusion comes after the then. So if what are not collinear? If points. So then the hypothesis of my contrapositive is if points are not on the same line, comma, then we're going to do the hypothesis of the inverse. The hypothesis of the inverse was points are not on the same line. So we're just going to grab that and write that as our new conclusion. Then they are not on. Oh, wait. Did I mess this up?
If points are on the same line, then they're not on the same line.
I totally messed it up, didn't I?
Yeah.
Okay, so what should have been the hypothesis here? It should have been the conclusion from up here.
Points are not collinear.
If points are not collinear. Oh my goodness. Where did my whiteout go? Oh, thank you. If points are not collinear. I looked at the wrong line. Why didn't someone say something? Isn't my whiteout awesome? There, it's done. Now I can write over it. No weird smell, no needing to wait for it to dry. It's like tape. Then they are not on the same line. HEB. Yeah, the office supplies. Literally, like, if you want to get me the best Christmas present, birthday present in the world, just get me a Walmart gift card or an Office Depot gift card, and let me go to town. I'm a happy camper. $50 at HEB's. $5. 10. All right, let's do the last one real quick. Let's do the contrapositive of acute angles. All right. I have the inverse up here, and hopefully I can write things in the right direction this time, because, oh my goodness, that was embarrassing. All right, so what was the conclusion of the inverse of the acute angles conditional statement? What was the conclusion, the thing after the then?
It is not an acute.
If it is not acute angle. So that's going to be my new hypothesis. If what is not an acute angle? Yeah, if an angle is not an acute angle, then what was the hypothesis of the inverse? I know there's a lot of words in here. What is the hypothesis, the thing after the if, of the inverse of the acute angle conditional statement? Then the measure of the angle is more than 90. Awesome. Then its measure, the measure of the angle, is more than 90 degrees. Fantastic. You guys are epically smart. That's it. We're done with notes. Okay, here is the assignment for the notes. All right, there it is. You will need to go through your notes from the beginning of the year. So if you don't have all of your notes yet, you have to go back and get them filled in. And you will find any 10 vocabulary words that you want. And I'm going to recommend that you pick the ones that you're struggling with, okay, the ones that you're having the most trouble remembering. And I want you to rewrite their definitions as those conditional if-then statements, okay? Like dog. So I'm defining the word dog. There it is, okay? Then after you write the conditional, you'll write the converse. After you write the converse, you write the inverse. After you write the inverse, you write the contrapositive. That's it, you're done, that's one. You need to do 10. Which means when you're done with this assignment, you will have 40 different sentences written. When is it due? Look at the due date.
30th.
The 30th, which is when? Next Tuesday, because we don't have school on Monday. I will be here, you will not. There's no school on Monday. You're welcome. Congratulations.
Hey.
I'm still recording! Oh! It's okay. Hopefully there was enough noise that didn't come out.
That kind of language.
It's okay. I don't know what she said. No. Okay, that's it. I'm going to turn it off now. Do you want to say bye to them? Bye. Good afternoon, 7th period. We're recording. How are you?
Bye.
Woo! All right, so as you can see, we're going to take notes. It's only one page. I have 3 different colors of pen today. This is my recommendation. You really only need the one. I'm going to recommend the 3 colors. All right, so if you haven't gotten a chance to watch the video 2.1 from the Flipped Math website, you might be a little lost, but go ahead and follow on, take notes anyway. Put question marks on that left-hand corner on the things that don't make sense, and then go back and watch that video before you rewatch this video to have it make sense for you. All right? Alrighty, so let's get started. My Elmo tries to realize that the lights got turned off. There we go. Thank you very much. While you're setting up your paper with our little T format for notes, I want to take a moment to remind you guys of what conditional statements are. They're if-then statements. They're sentences that have an if and a then, and they basically tell you a condition something has to meet for something else to happen. Okay? I do hear music in the background. If that's yours, I ask you please turn it off, pull out that headphone, focus with me for 20 minutes, and we're cool. All right, so let's go in and let's practice writing some conditional statements so we get a feel of what they look like. And let's start off with a vocabulary word that you guys are familiar with already, and that's collinear. What does collinear mean? Do you remember? Points that are on the same line. Beautiful. How would you write that so it's an if-then statement? If something, then something else. Not sure. Okay, you want to take a guess, anyone? How we could turn points on the same line into if something, then something?
Like if they're next to the line? Is that what you're saying?
Okay. Well, what did they need to be in order for them to be collinear?
On the line?
On the line. So that would be the condition. So if points are on a line, then they're collinear. Okay? So we'll write that as our conditional statement. If points are, ooh, it looks blurry over here. If points are on the same line, then they are collinear. Beautiful. So far, so good? All right, now this is the time for you to take your other colored pens. If you're using just one color, that's okay. I'd like you to underline this first part of the sentence. Don't underline the if, the stuff after the if. This part is the hypothesis. It's the condition you have to meet. If you turn in your homework, then you won't have 0. That kind of thing. It's the condition, yeah? So if their points are on the same line. I need you to switch colors if you're using different colors. If you're not, then double underline the second part of the sentence. Don't double underline then, just the stuff after then. That is the conclusion. Ooh, terrible handwriting today. That's the conclusion. Let me erase that and try it again. Okay, didn't quite work out. It's the conclusion. Okay? Those if and then are kind of like landmarks. All right, let's try another vocabulary word that we have in our notes. Let's try angle. You'll find angle, the definition for angle, back on the notes 915. So the notes from 915, you'll find the definition for angle. So if you'll flip back to 915, find that definition for me, read it for me out loud when you find it. So angles are formed by two rays that share an endpoint. Thank you very much. So how would we write that as an if-then statement? Angles are formed by two rays that share an endpoint. What's the condition for there to be an angle? What do you have to have? Same endpoint. What needs to share an endpoint? Two rays. So the condition is two rays that share the same endpoint. So if two rays share the same endpoint, then what? What do we have? An angle. Then there is an angle. Fantastic. Great. Take a moment right now. I won't do it in my notes for you, but you take a moment right now, underline the hypothesis. If you use different colors, use the same colors before. And double underline the conclusion, using the same colors you did before if you're using a different color. Beautiful, that would be the hypothesis. If there is an angle, yes. Zoomed in a little bit. Nicely done. Okay, I used a pencil to just kind of put a big line. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Let's go on to their relatives. And the first relative I want to talk about with you guys is the converse. Here's the test to see how many watched the video. What was converse?
The shoes that they sell.
The shoes that they sell. And you know what? They mentioned that in the video. Nice. So you must have watched it then. Thank you for being honest. Okay, so the converse says you take the hypothesis and the conclusion and you switch them around. So the short way to think about it is swap, which means change, replace. Swap the hypothesis and the conclusion. All right, so let's write the converse for Collinear. What was the conclusion of our original conditional statement? What was the conclusion of our original conditional statement for collinear? That was the hypothesis. What was the conclusion?
Oh, they are.
They are collinear. What are collinear? The points. So our new hypothesis is our old conclusion. If points are collinear, then what was our original hypothesis? Points are on the same line was our original hypothesis, so our new conclusion is points are on the same line. Yeah. Let's put then they are on the same line, so we don't repeat that word points too much. Good job. You guys are awesome at this. Nicely done. Let's write the converse for angle. Let's write the converse for angle. I'm putting a little spacer bar here to make it easier for you to all to see. All right, angle. What was the original conclusion for angle? There is an angle. So, if there is an angle, and notice this one, you didn't have to rewrite. You don't always have to rewrite them, but if it sounds kind of weird to you, you might want to consider rearranging some of the words so that it makes a little more sense, okay? You have that freedom. What was the original hypothesis? So that's your new conclusion. Then, two rays share the same endpoint. Nicely done.
Carranza,
Yes.
and can you contact your husband if possible?
Contact whom, I'm sorry?
Your husband.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As soon as possible.
Yes. So when this lecture is over. All right. Let's do the next relationship. The next relationship is called the inverse. The inverse negates the hypothesis and the conclusion. How did you know? Nice. Yeah, you looked above, right? It's got a pattern, right? What does negate mean?
It's the opposite of accepting.
It's the opposite of it. Yes, so if I said I like unicorns, what would be the opposite of that statement? I negate, well, how do you negate like? I like unicorns. I don't like unicorns. That would be the opposite of that statement. So that's what you're going to do to the hypothesis and to the conclusion. You're going to go in and try to figure out how can you get the word not in that sentence and have it make sense and mean the opposite of what it did originally. So let's try doing the inverse of collinear. All right, what was the original hypothesis for the conditional statement collinear? Points are on the same line. Negate that. Get the word not in there. Points are not on the same line. Nicely done. Beautiful. What's the original conclusion for collinear? What was the original conclusion? They are collinear, so negate that. They are not collinear. Gets really difficult, right? Right? This is really hard stuff?
Yep.
Yup, it's so hard. I'm being sarcastic. Does it feel easy? Yeah? A little bit? Okay. Okay, good. All right, you'll get to be experts at this really soon. Let's try angles. What was the original hypothesis for angles? Two rays share the same endpoint. All right, negate it. Two rays don't share the same endpoint. Nicely done. Beautiful. I know I went off the screen, I'm sorry. I rewrote it again, same endpoint. There it is. All right. What is the original conclusion? There is an angle. Negate it. There is not an angle. You guys are amazing at this. You know that? It's awesome. Okay, I'm going to zoom it out just a little bit so that way we can see everything. All right. Here is the last relation. Contrapositive. The biggest word we have on this one, and it means you're going to do a little more than the others. The contrapositive, again looking at the original statement, the original conditional, asks you to swap and negate the hypothesis and the conclusion. So you're going to do both. You're going to swap and you're going to negate. All right, let's look at of collinear. Let's look at the conditional statement for collinear. We have to swap them. So since we're getting ready to write the hypothesis, we need to look at the conclusion. What was the conclusion? They are collinear. We have to negate it. They are not collinear. And the they we're talking about was points. If points are not collinear, all right, what was the original hypothesis? Points are on the same line. Now we have to negate it. Yeah, they're not on the same line. You guys are awesome. I know you know. Fantastic. Let's try angle. The contrapositive of angle. What was the original conclusion? The original conclusion is there is an angle. So the negation is there is not an angle. If there is not an angle, then what was the original hypothesis? Two rays share the same endpoint. So negate it, you get? She's got this, doesn't she? Woo! Then two rays do not share an endpoint. There it is. That's all there is to this. One page and done. All right. Are you ready for the homework task that goes along with this, the assignment task that goes along with this so you can practice? Ready? Here it is. This is the task that goes with these notes so that you can practice doing this, okay? From your notes, all the notes you've taken for the whole school year from day one, that you've taken from day one, I want you to look through your notes and find 10 vocabulary words. You should have more than 10. We have a whole bunch. We're still recording. I need you to find 10 vocabulary words. Okay? And I'm going to recommend you pick the ones that are hard for you. And you're going to write the definitions as if-then statements. Once you've written them as your conditional statement, as your if-then, you're going to write the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive for each one. You're going to have 10 different words. Your original, conditional, converse, inverse, contrapositive. When you're done, you will have 40 different sentences written. What's the due date on this assignment? The 30th, which is next Tuesday. Okay? Good afternoon, 8th period. How you doing?
We're doing good.
All right, so today we're going to do 1 page worth of notes. All you need is writing utensils today. Please make sure you set up your paper with our note-taking tea. I've got 3 different colors of pens here. I recommend them, but you don't have to have them. You definitely need a writing utensil. Today is the 23rd of September. It is Tuesday. And the title of today's notes is Conditional Statements and Their Relatives. So we're going to get to meet some conditional statements and their tíos and their abuelitas. All right. So have you guys gotten a chance to watch the video 2.1 on flipped math yet?
I was about to watch it.
You're about to watch it?
I was about to watch it because I was watching Smallville last night.
Okay.
And I knocked out.
But then you passed out before you got to that. Well, I appreciate you thinking about it. Thank you. Going to remind you guys that since we're taking notes, please take the headphones out until we are done. Thank you very much. All right, so a conditional statement is an if-then statement. It has some sort of condition on it. If you meet this condition, then something else will happen. So let's practice writing one of these conditional statements. Let's start with a word that you guys are already familiar with. Collinear. What does the word collinear mean? They share what? Line. You're right. Points that share a line. Points on the same line. How do you write this as an if-then statement? What conditions do you need to have for points to be collinear?
They have to be on
They need to share the same line.
Yeah, they have to be on the same line. So that would go with the if. If points are on the same line, then what? Ladies. Thank you. Gentlemen. Thank you. Then you said they are collinear?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, so collinear. If points are on the same line, then they are collinear. There's your conditional statement. Let's try it again with another vocabulary word. Yeah? Coplanar? You want to use coplanar? Okay. I'm down with that. Coplanar. What's the definition of coplanar? Points and lines. One raised is stuff on the same plane. So points, lines, rays, segments on the same plane. So then what would be the condition? What's the condition? What do we need to have for them to be coplanar?
They all need to be on the same point.
They all need to be on the same plane. What needs to be on the same plane? Points and rays, lines, segments. So all of those things, if points, lines, rays, and segments are on the same plane, then what? If they're on the same plane, then what? They are coplanar. My dear, later. Okay? Later. Thank you. Then they are coplanar.
How many likes do you get on these?
I haven't gotten any yet. You can be the first.
What's the name of it?
My YouTube channel's up there.
Like
That's okay. All right. Cool. Let's meet the first relative. All right. Converse. Put your name. Converse means to swap. Oh, I need to go back and do something first. I'll finish writing this and then we'll go back. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself. I got distracted. I was having too much fun. Okay, this is the time to break out those colored pens. Okay, let's go back up here to these conditional statements, and I'd like you to underline this first part of the sentence. Points are on the same line. Underline it once. If you're using colors, pick one color. This is the hypothesis.
thesis.
Oh, I need to zoom out. There we go. It's the hypothesis. If you're using two colors in your other color, I want you to double underline the other part of your sentence. This is the conclusion. All right? Take a moment, identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of coplanar. Take a few seconds, identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of coplanar. Underline the hypothesis once. Underline the conclusion twice. I almost said confusion. Give me a thumbs up when you're done. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So now looking at the converse, now it says swap hypothesis and conclusion. Now that sentence makes sense. So let's write the converse of collinear. All right, it says swap. So what was the conclusion is now the hypothesis. What was the conclusion of the original conditional statement, that original if-then, for collinear? Read it. Yeah.
They are collinear.
You're right. They are collinear. That's the conclusion. What are collinear? What are collinear?
Share the same line. Lines on same plane.
But this they is referring to what?
Points.
Points. So the new conclusion of our converse is points are collinear. If points are collinear, then what? What was the original hypothesis?
They share the same line.
Points are on the same line. So your new conclusion is they are on the same line. All right? Make sense? All right. Let's try it for coplanar. We're going to try to write the converse for coplanar. What was the original conclusion for coplanar? What was the conclusion?
They are collinear.
They are coplanar. You read for me the whole conditional, which is awesome. But I'm looking for just the conclusion. It's they are coplanar. So if what are coplanar? Points, lines, rays, and segments. Okay? So we're going to write all that. If points, lines, rays,
Thank you.
you're welcome, and segments are coplanar, then What was the original hypothesis? They are on the same plane? All of that stuff? That's your new conclusion. Nicely done. Awesome. Let's go meet the next relative. Louise, if you don't mind, lean the other way. Thank you. I do. Okay, let's meet the next relative. The next relative is the inverse. The inverse. The inverse asks us to do this to the original conditional statement. It says negates the hypothesis and the conclusion. What does negate mean? What do you think it might mean? Take a guess. Change? Yeah, it definitely is going to change in some way. What does it kind of feel like it might mean? Negate. Neglect. Negative. Wonderful. Yeah, it kind of has this neglect and negative kind of feel to it. It kind of means the opposite of. So if I said I like unicorns, what would be the opposite of that statement?
I neglect unicorns.
I don't like unicorns. Okay? So to negate something is to get that word not in there to make it mean the opposite. All right? And we're going to do that to both the hypothesis and the conclusion, but it has to be of the very original conditional statement, which is at the very top, right? Very top of your paper. All right, so let's write the inverse of collinear. All right, what's the original hypothesis for the conditional statement for collinear? What was the original hypothesis? Points are on the same line. So negate it. They are not on the same line. So if points are not on the same line,
They are negated.
then what was the original conclusion? They're not collinear. Notice how, ladies and gentlemen, I am recording. I'm going to ask that you keep that ambient noise down. Thank you. Thank you. Notice how here I didn't use our vocabulary word, non-collinear, because I'm really trying to drive home that fact that you're using the word not in there, okay? They are not collinear. Nicely done. Let's try coplanar. All right, what's the original hypothesis for coplanar? Say it loud and proud, babe. You got it right.
Say it loud.
Loud and proud. You want to repeat what she said loud and proud?
Say it loud.
What did she say?
I know, I'm trying to get her to repeat it so we can hear it.
Come on.
Loud and proud, do it!
The points, lines, rays, and segments are collinear when they are.
Well, original. Was that our original? Or was that the swapped one? Are on the same plane. All right? So the original hypothesis is points, lines, rays, and segments are on the same plane. Negate it. Are not on the same plane, right? Okay, so we're going to write that. If points, lines, rays, and segments are not on the same plane, then what was the original conclusion for that sentence? Are coplanar was the original conclusion, so negate it and you get aren't, are not. Then they are not coplanar. Wonderfully done. Yes. We have one more relative to meet. Okay, you ready for this one? Let's do, yeah, I know, right? It's really big. Contrapositive. It's the biggest one there because you have to do the most to make it happen. For the contrapositive, you're going to swap. You're going to swap and negate the hypothesis and conclusion. So you're going to do both at the same time. Yes. All right, so let's do collinear. What was the original? We have to swap. What was the original conclusion for collinear? Conclusion first. They are collinear. Negate it. They are not. If points are not collinear, then what was the original hypothesis? Points are on the same line. Negate it. They are not on the same line. Step tap, thank you. They are not on the same line. Perfect. Let's try coplanar. What was the original conclusion for coplanar? They are coplanar. What are they? The points, lines? Okay, so the original conclusion was they are, so negate it and you get? They are not. They are not. Points, lines, rays, and segments are not coplanar. Then, what was the original hypothesis? What was the original hypothesis? Help me out. What was the original hypothesis? Go to the top, yeah. Go to the top of the page, go to the top of your notes. Under coplanar, what was the original hypothesis?
They're on the same plane.
They're on the same plane. Thank you. Thank you, Peanut Gallery. Thank you. Studio audience. That's a better way to say it. Thank you, studio audience, for helping him out, put him on the spot.
Thank you, Miss.
You're welcome. So negate it.
No.
They are on the same plane. The negation is?
Are
They are is the original. Negate it.
or not?
They are not. Then they are not on the same plane. Nicely done. Nicely done. Take a few seconds to finish writing that down. Wait, don't go anywhere. Wait. There's more. Order now. All right. Order now. And you get to know the task that will make sure that you practice how to do this. All right? Here is the task that you can do in order to practice this skill. And yes,